Hi, welcome to the show today. We have an extraordinary guest who embodies the spirit of global entrepreneurship and sustainable innovation. Joining us from his home in Bali, where he has resided for nearly 3 decades, is Ben Ripple. He is the visionary co-founder of Big Tree Farms. Originally from Connecticut, Ben's journey began with a passion for organic farming. This passion eventually led him and his wife to the lush landscapes of Indonesia, where they established an organic farm that still thrives today. Witnessing the struggles of traditional farmers, Ben embarked on a mission to connect them with the global markets, ensuring fair wages and preserving invaluable culinary heritage. Under his leadership, Big Tree Farms has grown to collaborate with over 17,000 certified organic and fair trade farmers, becoming a leader in sustainable coconut product innovation. We'll delve into his philosophy of playing the long game, building a vertically integrated business, and his dedication to bringing authentic flavors of Bali delicious to tables worldwide. Get ready to be inspired by a story of purpose, patience, and profound impact. Please welcome Ben Ripple. Welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina. I am here today with Ben Ripple, the CEO and co-founder of Big Tree Farms in Bali. Ben, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to, first of all, I have to say I'm super excited to be interviewing you today. I think you win the award so far as our furthest guest. I know you're traveling right now, but we have yet to have a guest from Asia yet. So I'm excited to have you on board for that reason. So put a little pin in my map.
Awesome. Well, I'm here in New York today and beaten up from a flight, but
Yeah.
excited to be here.
Yeah. And all things ironic, right? You're probably no more than 15 miles away from me at this very moment. So
Right.
the global world that we live in. So let's kind of start at the beginning. Tell everybody what Big Tree Farm is, what you do, and then I want to talk all about how you vertically have integrated the company, because I think that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, sure. So Big Tree Farms is really a unique social enterprise. I founded the company over 20 years ago in Indonesia as a nonprofit, but that didn't really work. So it evolved into a for profit. And over the years, the company has had one core tenet, and that's to really sort of promote sustainable, or now we call it regenerative agriculture, that really, in our minds, is the driver for improving livelihoods for smallholder farmers. And so that's been the sort of the underlying tenet of everything that we do at Big Tree Farms. And our focus over the years has changed to different crops, different focus areas within Indonesia, but really sort of as a business, the main driver of our business, our revenues, is this incredible coconut sugar that we bring to the US market, as well as a line of marinades and sauces. And right now, everything that we produce at Big Tree has this magic of coconut flower nectar inside the product. So
Yeah, amazing. It sounds delicious. I just used some coconut sugar the other day. I made some bacon wrapped dates, and instead of covering them with brown sugar, I used some coconut sugar. Everybody liked it. So, it's funny that you mentioned regenerative agriculture, because this is the second time that this has come up in a podcast, the one I recorded the other day. From the farm, which is a like an Airbnb for farmers.
okay, cool.
Yeah, so interesting concept. You mentioned that too. So let's just take one step back. And for those that aren't so involved in the agricultural side, just tell us what regenerative agriculture is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that regenerative agriculture should be important for all of us. We live on a planet that has finite resources, and we can either strip and consume those resources, or we can build and replenish those resources. One of those is better for us in the long run.
Yeah.
And that's really what regenerative agriculture seeks to do. So it's about building soil, it's about building biodiversity, it's about conserving water, and really mitigating all of these sort of vicious impacts associated with climate volatility, climate change.
Yeah. Yeah. And so important for us as a society as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have a long-standing background in organic farming. So take us back and just tell us a little bit about your personal story, and how did you end up in Indonesia after traveling quite a ways around the globe?
Wow. All right, we're gonna go way back. So yeah, I mean, I've always been had a passion for agriculture, for organic farming. Back when I was growing up on Pilgrim Road in the suburbs of West Hartford, Connecticut, when the rest of the neighborhood was playing, kill the carrier or street hockey, I was in the backyard, planting corn and things like that. I think most people thought I had a bit of a screw loose, odd child, but that passion for agriculture and watching things grow and stewarding the environment, stuck with me. I ended up going to university for sustainable agriculture in Western Washington. I always had a real passion for learning about agricultural heritage, different growing systems. And geez, this goes back to 96. I had a sort of a outrageous opportunity to go backpacking that popped up. And I took my then girlfriend, now wife, and we took off backpacking from the US through Australia into to Western Asia. And our original plan was to learn as much as we could about traditional agriculture and bring some of those learnings back to the US, where we thought we would eventually set up a sustainable farm.
Yeah.
Sort of a world view farm. Never happened. We didn't. We ended up backpacking and then staying. And our vision of a small organic farm did come true, but it came true on the island of Bali. And we started that organic farm in uh, 90, sort of beginning in 98. And that continues today as a community supported agriculture farm. We deliver to hotels and restaurants. My wife runs that side of the business. And then out of that business grew this company, Big Tree Farms, which was really how do we expand what we're doing with vegetable farmers, annual crops? How do we take that same concept and apply it to traditional farmers growing in permacultural systems, or what we call agroecology systems? Food forests is the word I like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice word to. It paints just such a beautiful picture when you use that phrase. So, was it that you just got to Bali and you're like, we have to stay here, or did you just see like there was just opportunity? Like, what was that light switch that went off for you guys?
Well, originally, funny story. Originally, we were backpacking. We got to Bali after about 6 months. We had been told by some friends that we had met on the backpacker path in far eastern Indonesia that we should go to this mountain village called Cinnamon. We got there. We stayed with this family, and with I think we had been there 2 days, and the Pak Kari. Pakinyoman Kari, wonderful man. He woke Blair and I up in the early morning, brought us up to this piece of land, and said, I talked with my father, and you have to stay here and start your organic farm here. Blair looked at me and sort of, she was like, we're only a couple months in here. I'm not sure I'm ready to go Mosquito Coast with you. But I was all in at that point. I knew that I was going to stay regardless of what happened with Blair. I'm very happy that she decided to
Yeah,
stay
she
with
she
me.
took that chance.
Right.
Wow.
But it turns out, by the way, over breakfast later that day, we found out that he had spoken to his father, but not in person. His father had been dead for like 10 years, but he came back and he whispered to him, talked to him in his
They
dreams,
send him a message. Okay.
sent him a message, and that message started us on our voyage. What
Wow.
is today Big Tree Farms?
Wow.
With over 17,000 farmers impacted in our supply chain. So pretty
Yeah.
cool chain of events.
Yeah. So he knew it was meant to be for you guys. He had to convince you and your wife to to get on board with it. And then it's been, how long has it been now? A couple decades, right?
Yeah, I guess we're nearing 28 years. I can't do the math in my head,
Yeah.
but really we sort of were formally in Bali. We started backpacking before we were in
hmm
Bali sort of end of 97.
Wow. Impressive origin story of how you landed. So then as you begin to establish, you were given this land or coordinated to have this land, and then you started working with all these farmers. So 17,000 farmers across Indonesia. So how did that all come about?
Well, yeah. So if we go all the way back to sort of the small organic farm, the vision was to take these systems that we had learned for market gardening, which is growing for a market, right?
hmm
So growing specific volumes of crops and lots of them based on customer demand. And so it's, you don't have, anyway, we're not really talking about the organic farm, but the point is that that was a piece of learning that really didn't exist in Indonesia at the time. We weren't very far from a time when we first got to Indonesia. We were only like 15 years prior to our arrival. Everything in Indonesia was organic.
Yeah.
So the introduction of chemicals in agriculture and even of plastic in Indonesia was really just over a decade
Hmm.
prior to our arrival in Indonesia, which is pretty crazy to think about, especially given where we are today globally. And so we didn't need to teach organic. We
Hmm.
had to provide sort of a way to grow organically that would connect with the way the market for organic would accept the product.
Hmm.
And then we had to facilitate that through distribution. And so
Yeah.
the small organic farm really started as a learning farm. And through that, we created a network of growers in Bali, besides our own farm, that were growing organic and that we could distribute. That same model was the impetus for Big Tree Farms.
Hmm.
So Big Tree Farms, we started with, 7 farmers, one coconut sugar farmer, one honey farmer,
Yeah.
one sea salt producer, one coconut farmer, and we would use those ingredients that we worked with them to produce in a small restaurant that we had on our small organic farm in Bali,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because that's where the first demand for these products came from. We
Yeah.
had chefs that would come to this little supper club, no electricity, just spits, pits, and wood fires, and
Uh-huh.
they wanted to bring these products home. So that was the first sort of connection of, it's not just Bali, but people around the world would like to see these products.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that, it wasn't a great leap to say, okay, well, how do we start building, farmer groups,
Yeah.
farmer cooperatives for these various ingredients? And that was really sort of where Big Tree Farms started.
Yeah.
And so we had taken the same concept as we had for the organic farm, applied it to this concept with traditional farmers growing in food forests. And over time, slowly but surely, our farmer groups grew in numbers. In 2003, we set up the first organic certificate in Indonesia, other than coffee. Coffee had some organic
Mm-hmm.
certifications in Indonesia prior, but other than that, there was no organic certification in
Wow.
country. We set up the first organic certification in country for coconut sugar in
Mm-hmm.
2003. That was with, I think it was just under 50 farmers.
Hmm.
And since then, we've grown now to well over 8,000 farms. Actually, now it's almost 9,000 farms certified organic. 5,000 of those farms are also fair trade certified. About 5,000 of those farms are also regenerative organic certified. And on each farm, you have between 2 and 3 farm individuals. So you have a
Mm-hmm.
tapper, and you either have 1 or 2 cooks that are processing this coconut flower nectar into sugar. And so that's where we get our sort of between 17 and 18,000 individuals that are part of our supply
Yeah.
chain
Yeah.
getting impacted.
Impressive growth. It's been a lot of years in the making, but you've created such an ecosystem across, the different types of farms. And I love what you're doing, even helping them to figure out how to get distribution. Are you working with the farms to help them figure out how to get distribution outside of Indonesia? Or are you just educating them on how to do it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And in the beginning, we were really just helping the farmers to improve the product and to improve the value addition opportunities of the product.
Yeah.
Right. And we were in the early days of Big Tree Farms, we were most of our revenue really, it wasn't really revenue, but our cash flow was mainly driven by partnerships
Mm-hmm.
with either non-governmental or governmental institutions looking for impact projects.
Mm-hmm.
So working with USAID, working with other groups in Europe to facilitate on the ground income improvement, livelihood improvement projects. And then through that, what we saw was that these projects were fantastic when they were being executed.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as the project was done and the cash that was operating that program was done, we'd walk away and then we'd find out, oh, well, the whole project collapsed
Yeah.
because there's no market. And so that was probably the second iteration of Big Tree Farms, or
Mm-hmm.
as we were developing this model, we realized we needed to bring the market. That
Mm-hmm.
had to be something that we brought into the equation. So yeah, at that point, we started focusing on what I would call more of a trading model. So we would partner with the farmers. We would provide that basic training in food safety, in value addition. We would develop the farmers into organic certified groups. And then we would just buy the product straight from the farmers and try to sell it.
Okay.
That also had challenges because these were products being produced, in like thatch huts.
Right.
And many, many thatch huts. So applying sort of centralized quality controls and having quality assurance on products was really challenging.
I'm sure.
I remember back in our earliest days of selling product, we actually did have a retail brand. It was very specialty. And I won't mention the retailer, but we launched and we actually had a customer write us a comment saying, when I put the coconut sugar into my coffee, I think it was tea actually, when I put it in the tea, there are these little black specks that float to the top. What are those? And we confidently responded, oh, those are ants and they're perfectly fine to eat.
Just a
Traditional,
little
right?
extra protein.
Right. So we learned pretty quick that what we saw as beauty and magic in the supply chain was didn't always translate well to the end consumer. So
Yeah.
sort of the third iterative process of Big Tree Farms was, how do we add value without stripping value from farmers? How do we add additional value through taking on part of that manufacturing challenge for the farmers? And really, ensuring highest quality, highest consistency. And so that's sort of, I think, really where the company found its real traction and started to grow. So today, like I said before, we've got a supply chain of over 17,000 individuals. We have our manufacturing facilities in Indonesia bring in a lot, over 200 ton of material every single week. We process and then we ship globally, both under our own retail brand, Big Tree Farms, but also to ingredient customers. Those can be private brands, manufacturers, other distributors all over the world.
Yeah.
So,
And
a
what
long way.
products are you shipping? And mostly coconut sugar, but other products as well?
Yeah, so we're still very much focused as a company on the sweet flower nectar of the coconut palm and converting that into this base material. We either buy it from farmers as pure flower nectar, or we buy it from them as sort of a liquid stabilized syrup, or we buy it in sort of these block caramels, or we buy it as a granulated product that the farmers do. And interestingly, one of the challenges that we found was that the old adage that all value addition, all sort of the more of a supply chain that a producer can own, the better their return. We found that not to be so true. Actually, when farmers granulate the product, the process for producing the granulated sugar requires so much energy, and they're cooking over traditional wood stoves. So that energy comes in the form of more palm fronds, more wood for the fire. And actually the cost of that outweighs the benefit of that final piece of value addition. So we do purchase granulated sugar from farmer groups that want to produce it. They make beautiful product, but most of our procurement now is focused on either the liquids or this block caramel. And then we do the further manufacturing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about coconut sugar and why we should know more about it.
Well, first of all, it's, I think, the most amazing sweetener. It's the only, it's really as a caloric sweetener. And so maybe I explained the difference there. So there are non-caloric sweeteners that are incredibly sustainable, right? Wild honey, incredibly sustainable as long as you steward the hive and you don't cut too much of the honey out. Maple, right? Incredibly sustainable in terms of the practice. But there's also, those are not caloric sweeteners, right? So like if you look at caloric sweeteners, cane sugar, beet sugar, coconut sugar, and these sweeteners tend to be pretty aggressive in terms of their nutrient consumption. They also tend to be pretty aggressive in terms of their water consumption. And the way that they're grown in massive monocrops is really negatively impactful to our soil resource base. So what's interesting about coconut, and this is just from sort of the sustainability angle, 1 acre of coconut trees, right? And there's only 75 trees per acre, right? So 75 coconut trees can produce almost 1.5x the sucrose, the sugar, by weight as an entire acre of cane. And imagine how many
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of stalks of sugar cane are in a field. And it does so, you plant those trees once and you can harvest once they start producing, which is sort of year 3, 4. You can harvest every single day for up to 80 years before the tree goes into senescence or old age, right? Which is pretty amazing because and the other side about coconut sugar that I think most people don't know is that those coconut trees, they don't need irrigation. You can use irrigation if you want to really pump production, but you don't need it. And none of our farmers use irrigation. It's all rainfall. And in that system, the production of coconut sugar versus cane sugar, it uses 10 times less water. So each acre you can produce 150% more product using 10 times less water. And you're growing there are coconut plantations in the world that are monocrops, but all of our production comes from smallholder farmers in very diverse food forests or agroforestry systems. So, and the reason for that is these small farmers, if they have an acre, they can't possibly climb 75 trees a day to harvest the flower nectar. They may only have 20 trees, right? 20 coconuts on that acre, and everything else they might have durian trees or large, teak trees, acacia trees, coffee, banana, vanilla, ginger, and galangal. There's so much diversity in these food forests, but just those trees, they're so much more productive than sugarcane. They're part of a soil conserving agroforestry. They use minimal water. So just from the sustainability angle alone, coconut sugar is superior to cane and beet. But then why do people really want to use it? What's in it for me, right?
Yeah. The other side of the story.
What's in it for me is a totally different story. It's the only caloric sweetener that's low glycemic. So that's huge.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Well, it means that you don't get that sort of big sugar energy spike and then crash, right? That a lot of people think about when they think about sort of overconsumption of sugar, right? So the low glycemic aspect of coconut sugar means that the energy is metabolized and released into the bloodstream at a much more consistent pace.
Yeah.
And the pace is such that we can use that energy instead of taking it and storing it as fat, right? So sugar, overconsumption of sugar, people think of fat, right? Not the case as much for coconut sugar because of that low glycemic aspect. It's also delicious, right? How many people want to take a spoonful of cane sugar in their mouth? I can tell you from 20 years of demoing this product, many people want to take a spoonful of coconut sugar. It's just so good.
It is. It is. Yeah. I was super happy with, I've used it before in the past, but I was like, oh, I have this bag. Let me try using it instead of regular sugar. My father-in-law is a diabetic too. So I'm always, sensitive to what sugar I'm putting in what I'm cooking. So let me try this one. And it has like almost like it's not as dark as brown sugar, but it has a nice grain to it. It's very enjoyable to cook with.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite sweetener, but I'm clearly
maybe a little biased, but so, that's, on the ingredient side of it. And then, you kind of alluded to, other things you manufacture. And I want you to talk a little bit about your barbecue brand and Bali Delicious. So take us into that part of your life.
So, as you can probably tell in this podcast, I talk a lot. And I will say that over the 20 years of building this business, Big Tree Farms as a concept, it's not the easiest business to explain in an elevator pitch.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of depth, a lot of history. So yeah, there's a lot going on with it.
Yeah, it depends on how tall the skyscraper is, but most of the times you get to the floor before I finished explaining the company.
Yeah.
So we really needed to find a way to explain the company, but also explain like our mission and our vision, right? And enter the concept of Bali Delicious. So what is Bali Delicious? Well, first of all, Bali, we originally founded the company in Bali. Today, we're all over Indonesia. Our manufacturing is in Java, but Bali, I think, is a touch point for most consumers when they think of Indonesia. If they even think of Indonesia, what they know is Bali. And so it creates a sense of place that people have an understanding of. even if they haven't been there. There's this idea of culture, magic, and madness in this word Bali,
Yeah.
and so much of it is authentic. Really, that's been my experience
Mm-hmm.
of almost 30 years living in Bali, living in Indonesia, is deeply connected to the culture, the people, and myself, and an incredible magic and madness, this balance that exists in
Mm-hmm.
Bali. And so that idea, that concept of Bali becomes a surrogate for the culinary cultural heritage of Indonesia. And so Bali Delicious is our way of communicating that our core focus is bringing these aspects of traditional culinary cultural heritage to the market in the United States, to the shelves in the United States, to
Mm-hmm.
consumers, so that they can experience the flavor, the history, the story, the magic, the madness
Mm-hmm.
of Bali, of Indonesia in every bite. And how does that concept play out in terms of products? So obviously we've talked about coconut sugar. We also were one of the sort of pioneers in this product called in the market for a product called coconut aminos. What's coconut aminos? Well, coconut aminos is sort of a soy-free soy sauce alternative. That's where it's sort of found its home in the US. What's interesting is that we're in a lot of major national retailers with this product, and we sell more. Our unit velocity is higher
Mm-hmm.
than soy sauce. So it's not just because it's a replacement for soy sauce that's soy free. There are food tribes that are looking
Mm-hmm.
for soy free replacements. But much more than that, coconut aminos has become sort of your go to sauce. It's
Mm-hmm.
sweet, it's savory, it has that umami depth
Yeah.
that soy sauce has. And it's just as applicable as a soy sauce squirt on top of stir
Mm-hmm.
fries as it is, a standalone marinade. It's a swap for soy sauce. It's a marinade. It's a dip. It's a drizzle. It really has become this incredible go-to sauce that now is a standalone product,
Yeah.
right? It's not just an alternative to soy sauce, but it's become its own thing. I always wondered how Worcestershire became a thing.
Yeah.
Well, now I know, because coconut aminos has become a thing. So, um, coconut aminos, from coconut aminos, we started iterating on that incredible base, and started to create marinades. And so today we've got a Bali teriyaki, again, soy free, which is amazing. The flavor of the teriyaki is amazing.
Yeah.
It's really punchy. And one of the important focus areas for us with our marinades was making sure that the flavor that's in the bottle stays with the protein, or stays with the
Mm-hmm.
veggie, or whatever it is that
Right.
you're marinating after you cook it. So many times marinades, the flavor
Yeah, kind of
volatilizes
cook.
or it
Yeah.
dissipates. Not so with our Bali teriyaki or our ponzu zing, which
Mm-hmm.
is a very citrus
I like
forward,
ponzu
sort of
sauce. Yeah.
bright poke bowl enhancer, seafood enhancer, or our lime and ginger, which, I always thought those two flavors were like the most iconic flavors in the kitchen when you're talking about sort of like a pan Asian flavor.
Right. Sure.
But then we launched this product and we realized there is no other ginger lime or lime ginger marinade on the shelf in the US. Pretty
Hmm.
crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And those two flavors really are iconic
Yeah.
of like the entire Bali kitchen. So
Yeah.
we launched those marinades as well. And then earlier this year, we took a big step forward and we launched our Bali barbecue sauce, what we lovingly call the naughty sauce.
Okay.
Uh, and it's naughty because it's got some heat to it.
Okay.
So if you're a lover of hot sauces and you're a lover of barbecue sauces, or
Hmm.
you just love global flavor,
Yep.
you got to get your hands on the Bali barbecue sauce. So
Nice.
again, focus on authentic flavors of Indonesia, Bali centric,
Yeah.
which is to say that we've got in the Bali barbecue sauce, instead of just having sort of like, that ketchup, onion, brown sugar, vinegar
Right.
approach, we have tamarind, turmeric, ginger, garlic,
Ah,
shallot.
you're speaking my language. These are all my
Yeah.
favorites.
So really good. And
Yeah.
obviously chilies,
Yeah.
which are so important to Indonesian cuisine.
Yeah. So that was going to be my follow-up question to that is how much heat is there in Indonesian or Balinese food?
Well, so I'm glad that I have a fantastic team,
Yeah.
because the first iteration, of Bali barbecue was, I think, what some might call like firehouse level.
Okay.
It was, and we still have it today. We launched it. It's our volcanic version
Okay.
of Bali barbecue. To me, that's like the medium, but
Yeah.
it's really spicy. But then it became clear that we needed a flavor for baby tongues. So that's we when we think of the mass population of the U.S., this is
Yeah, yeah.
actually our
Not
marketing.
everybody's used to the heat.
Yeah. So our mild version, which is the not so naughty
Mm-hmm.
Bali barbecue sauce,
Okay.
is a great entry point if you just want to taste the flavor and that sort of magical alchemy that we put together in the barbecue sauce. It does not have heat, and then our original just has a little kick,
Mm-hmm.
little kick.
Yeah, yeah. Just to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I love it. So, what is it on the shelves as? Is it under the Big Tree brand or?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So
Big
people can
Tree
look for that.
Farms Bali barbecue sauce. We just launched it. You can find them at Sprouts Farmers Market. You can also find it at Publix.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Fantastic. So, I'm curious, and I know we're running up on time, but I have to ask you this question. You're running a global business, you're in Indonesia probably most of the time. So, how have you established the retail side of the business, the CPG side from across the globe in the US?
Yeah, I would say two things. The first is, we had to develop a U.S. team. So our
Yeah.
company really is multinational now with two major sides to the business, the U.S. side of the business, which really handles the retail, the marketing, and then the Indonesian side of the business, which really handles supply chain manufacturing and ingredient sales. But the other side, and I think this is important for any entrepreneurs today, is patience. You can go about retail one of two ways. You can make it your be all end all, and you can spend insanely to try to drive the product into the marketplace. And it was a different world 15 years ago, 20
Mm-hmm.
years ago, just in terms of what margins were, what the cost of doing business in the retail market was. And as time has marched forward, look, retailers take much higher margins today than they used to. Nationwide distributors, Unify, KeHE, their cost of doing business is higher than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Global freight is much higher than it used to be. Just the simple cost of ingredients
Yeah.
has inflated. And so there's been margin compression, and it occurs everywhere, but obviously my view is of the margin compression for small businesses like Big Tree
Yeah.
Farms.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you push your product into the market too fast, yes, you might see growth, but at the same time, you're going to need a lot of cash. And
Yeah.
that lot of cash can mean heavy dilution
Mm.
with um, unfavorable terms for founders. And I
Sure.
think that's really the unfortunate part of the retail market today. Margin compression, the challenge of building a scalable, profitable retail brand comes oftentimes at the expense of founder ownership and of founder true vision. And so with Big Tree, we tried to make sure that our business was balanced between the ingredient business and the retail side of the business. So the
Mhm.
ingredient business really becomes our fuel for growth to build patiently over
Yeah.
time our retail brand.
Yeah. I mean, that right there is such incredible insight into, how patience really is critical in a world where we're told to rush and we're told that we have to jump on top of, the latest thing immediately to capture a market share. But, I think your story itself proves the long run can be successful too.
Yeah, I remember last thing. I remember words of wisdom, just a wonderful leader of the organic movement and in within the organic retail movement
Hmm.
said to me one time, and this is about 10 years ago, why are you stressing out? Don't rush it, right? Look
Yeah.
at me. I was a 20-year overnight success.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That, slow and steady wins the race. I think we all have learned that parable from as a kid, right? So my last question for you before we wrap up today is what has been your recipe to revenue?
Well, partly what I just mentioned, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is the I think our recipe to revenue has been number one, ensuring a multi-pronged stool.
Yeah.
So not putting all our eggs in one basket. I think that's been really critical. And obviously
Yeah.
that's easier said than done. We built our
Yeah.
company with a focus on vertical integration so that we can
Yeah.
be the most efficient purveyor of the products that we source and produce,
Yeah.
whether it's to the ingredient market, whether it's to the private label market, whether it's to our own retail brand. And that's been crucial to our success. But also, I would say that the other side really for us has been just building a culture of quality.
Mm-hmm.
And that quality is not just in terms of the food that we produce, but in terms of the communication, the customer service, and our commitment to our original goals. So there, quality touches on all that. And I think that those are sort of, I would say those are non-negotiable areas of our business.
Yeah.
And we've really kept our focus there, kept our commitments, and over time that has I think made a tremendous difference for us in terms of the wins that we've had.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. You're not cutting corners and you're really taking time to create good in the system that you are building at the same time. And I love that piece of advice. Being an entrepreneur is risky. Starting a business is risky. The risk of failure is high, but you're mitigating that risk by creating, a system within your business that can nurture the parts together. So
Yeah.
I commend you for that.
E. Cummings, my grandfather, gave me a poem when I started this business. Everybody fails some of the time. And I think that was really, an important lesson for me, because boy,
Yeah.
oh boy, over 20 years, we sure have failed many times. But we have incredible investors that are long-term supportive of the vision. And everybody does fail some of the times. And so being not afraid to fail,
Yeah.
I think that's the offset to the conversation about entrepreneurial risk. And
Yeah, it's all learning experience. If you don't look at it as I'm a failure, you look at it as this is an opportunity for me to learn of how I can do this better or what doesn't work and I can move on. Then you
yeah,
are you
I'm
are
thankful
free to
for
move on.
I'm thankful for every one of those failures, because it's the only way to learn. It's the best way to learn.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, to share your insights, to share the history of the business and how you have grown it. It's been such a miraculous story. We will share the link to where you can find your website and your social in the conversation down below. So check that out and support Big Tree Farms. Thanks,
Yeah,
Ben.
thank you so much, Leah. I appreciate it.
All
It was
right.
fun.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
Take care.